to the Money Desk now. We've got our business editor, Devin Murugan, in studio. So, Devin, I mean, yesterday, I don't know what you think. Yesterday, I spoke to an economist who said, Davy wrote to be specific. He said, going to Davos is actually a waste of time in South Africa right now. We've got bigger problems. But how is Team South Africa selling South Africa there?
Well, you've, drew the curtains open very nicely there. Look, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. And I think anyone who's there would tell you that. A lot of questions to ask about what's happening with the local economy. Yet, we have to pull in the investment. So you can understand why we have to be far-reaching on that. In fact, we've got one of the CEOs that's going to talk to us in a second. The World Economic Forum, as you say, Masego, that gathering aimed at consolidating ideas from the world's powerful leaders. Continuing in Switzerland, Team South Africa, as you rightly say, is there again this year. It's a sales pitch. It carries on. Well, on the video line from Davos, Nedbank CEO Mike Brown joins us. Mike, thanks very much indeed for joining us from the north there. You no stranger to Davos. You've been there several times. And I'm wondering, first of all, in the midst of all these bigger problems nowadays, you've got Russia-Ukraine war, higher global interest rates and inflation, there's a fear of a global recession. Can South Africa still get some attention?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And we've just finished the closing session now. And certainly you are right. There are enormous challenges out there in the world. But underneath that, actually a mood of slightly improved optimism that the outcome of those challenges, certainly economically, hasn't been as bad as previously thought. And certainly for South Africa, I heard earlier, a suggestion that we shouldn't be here given those challenges. I would disagree completely. I think it is when you have challenges that you need to be seen and you need to talk about those challenges. And certainly from a South African point of view, we've been very upfront about those challenges, and particularly in the energy environment. And it is only, I think, once we start to show meaningful progress in resolving them, which we haven't yet, but once we start to show meaningful progress, that we are likely to attract meaningful long-term investment back into our country, given the great potential we have, particularly in things like our mineral wealth, our travel and tourism, and our innovation and financial services sectors.
Mike, those challenges that you speak of, I mean, the list of troubles are long, from power cuts to anemic growth. From what you've seen so far, how is Team South Africa turning that into a positive story? And maybe I should ask you then, what is the corridor and coffee shop talk about South Africa as you experienced it over the last few days?
Look, I think certainly Team South Africa, and we all have individual meetings and some collective meetings, but has been very upfront and forthright about the challenges. Eskom should never have got into the position that it is today, where we are experiencing absolutely critical levels of load shedding. However, there is, in particular through the NECOM set up, a plan to resolve that. It's not a short-term plan. It's a plan that is likely to take somewhere between 18 to 24 months. And there's a huge focus on getting that done, because quite simply, the anemic growth that we are seeing is largely as a consequence of the lack of energy supply. So I think the chatter in the corridors would be around South Africa recognizing her challenges. And, many investors who have existing investments in the country continue to build and grow those, like we continue to invest at Nedbank. But I think large new investment is likely to sit on the fence until they see real progress in resolving our electricity supply challenges.
And that's the real departure point, isn't it, Mike? Because your bank, Nedbank, looking at 2023, it's got growth forecasted around about 1.5%. And that really can only change when you stop talking about South Africa as a resilient economy and start talking about it as a successful one. That's the challenge, though, isn't it?
Absolutely. We just simply are unable to grow by more than around about 1.5% because electricity is a binding constraint on growth. That's why it is absolutely the critical path to raise growth rates, alongside, of course, other very, very important things, particularly in areas like logistics and in security. Those are all important, but the critical path is absolutely electricity.
Yeah, so what's the one thing you think South Africa comes back with this time around that's positive?
Yeah, I think, South Africa comes back with a message that many other countries in the world are also struggling. So we are not alone. Clearly, ours feels like more of an own goal than many others. But, the message for me is that if we are able to show progress in addressing this electricity challenge, and that is vital, the international community is willing to invest in South Africa, but we've got to solve our own problem first.
Yeah. Mike, just very quickly, before I let you go, that NECOM plan for addressing the electricity crisis, just very quickly, your thoughts on what's been emerging so far on that?
Yeah, so my thoughts are very clearly that, this is a plan that's come together over the last couple of months under 5 or 6 key drivers, and I think it is broadly a very sensible plan. The challenge we've had in South Africa is our absolute inability somehow to execute on the plans that we have. And that's really what we've got to focus on, is laser-like execution of our current plan. We don't need to dream up more plans. We don't need to move Eskom around in government structures. We need to deliver on the plans in front of us. It's that simple.
Mike Brown, Nedbank CEO, talking to us from Davos. Thanks very much indeed for sharing your thoughts. All right, the